Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. This is the second webinar in our retail banking series, and on behalf of here at eGain, we're super happy you're here. So here's a brief look at where we are in this webinar series. We're running 3 webinars from April 9th through 23rd, each one focused on a different part of the challenges that banks and credit unions face. Last week, we kicked things off with Road Credit Union and talked about using trusted knowledge for faster, more confident service. And today, we're building on that with a look at the frontline agent experience. Now, a couple of quick logistics. Everyone is on mute during this webinar, and you will get a copy of the slides and recording after the session. If you're on the GoToWebinar and this is your first time and not familiar with it, you should see a control panel with a questions pane or icon, and that's where you can drop in questions at any time. We will do a Q&A at the end, and we'll also get to as many questions along the way. Now, let me introduce today's guests. I'm very excited to have Vicki Sanders, Chief Digital Officer at Here. Here builds an enterprise browser purpose-built for banks, and Vicki has been at the center of bringing that technology to frontline teams. Along with Vicki is my colleague Stephen Bibby from eGain, who brings over 35 years of experience in strategy, sales, and customer experience, including senior roles at Wells Fargo. Vicki, Stephen, over to you.
Thanks very much, Miguel. Stephen, it's great to be here with you today. We're very excited to be partners of eGain, and that our Here browser is part of the AI Knowledge Suite for retail banking that you recently launched. As an organization, and as Miguel said, we've been working with financial services firms for well over a decade and count 90% of the largest global investment banks as our customers, including some of those who've invested in our business like JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, Barclays, ING, and several others. We've seen a really interesting transformation where our clients have taken us from the trading floor, where we first started working with them, across to many other use cases, operations support, and ultimately in contact centers, where we have this really interesting productivity frontline. And Stephen, I think that's something that you've been had a career front and center of for the last 35 years, isn't it?
Definitely saw that quite a bit at Wells Fargo. Always trying to get the right information to the right banker at the right time, and just keyword based. You had to know the right keyword to get to the right thing, and each application had its own little piece of knowledge. So it's really hard to track down where the right answer was.
Absolutely, and that contact center dilemma continues today, and firms are definitely at different stages of their digitalization and tackling this problem. We see it as twofold. You have the top-down pressures, right? So the management mandate that response times need to be reduced, that the customer experience at the same time needs to be improved, measured by NPS and other metrics. But now more recently, firms are also being asked to deliver AI results and to roll out AI. But the reality sitting underneath is that their agents are stuck in this toggle chaos, right? So you just mentioned lots of applications. They're toggling across a multitude of apps, between 8 to 12 apps needed to complete a task. And very often their knowledge is spread across those different applications, knowledge stores, central sources of data, or decentralized sources of data. Which means it's a lot harder to have a great customer experience and also reduce those call times. And what we've observed as an organization is that agents can toggle up to 1,200 times a day between those apps that they need. When we've done time and motion studies with customers, we've found that call time is spent as much as 45% of the active call with the agent searching for information, and 15% of time rekeying that data. So there's a lot of downtime on calls, which is a pressure on the agent as well as ultimately on the customer experience. And then, I don't know if you saw that latest MIT report, Stephen, but we're hearing that 85% of AI projects are failing to roll into production.
Yeah, in fact, Gartner never comes out with a 100%. So those of you who are Gartner fans will recognize this, but they said 100% of generative AI, virtual customer assistant, and virtual agent assistant projects that lack integration to modern knowledge management systems will fail to meet their customer experience and operational goals. It's really coming from this same idea that looking for the right information and all this time searching, and sometimes even when they find it, they don't trust it. So then it's going to, well, I know Joe in the cube next to me usually knows the answer, so let me ask him. And that just multiplies this impact.
Yeah, we're seeing that with a lot of our customers right now, where the AI implementation is accelerating their need to solve the underlying chaos that sits in how their agents work on a day-to-day basis. I think we can both agree that the costs to this challenge are real for any type of organization. And those challenges and those costs sit across three different types of users. So first, there's the be-all and the end-all, the customer, him or herself, and they're suffering from longer waiting times, those in-call delays, some of the stats I just mentioned, and also that poor overall experience. And then for agents, they're frustrated. 60% of agents in a recent report said they lack the operational tools to deliver great customer experiences. That has a knock-on effect to making their job and experience more difficult, and ultimately there's higher turnover and then slower onboarding of the new hires. And then a lot of the folks on this call, I suspect, are contact center platform owners that in technology or product, and they face a dilemma. They can have experiences that are largely browser-based and feel free, but they result in a lot of user friction, that toggling across of applications, lacking that unified desktop experience. And the dilemma of choosing an all-in vendor, maybe a CCaaS solution or CRM, where they're hearing they can bundle everything and embed everything into one system. But the reality is they find that that's restrictive, can often be expensive with very long lead times and a lack of control. I think we've seen that recently with the announcement from Salesforce and Genesys, who are retiring OpenCTI. And I've heard there's more than 1,000 customer firms who within the next 2 years need to come up with a new strategy for that product being pulled from the market.
Vicki, I agree with everything you're saying here. And one of the things that's kind of behind the agent, and I think has the impact across all three of these panels, is the cognitive load that this puts on them, whether it's toggling or trying to find the right answer. Would you say that's a primary thing that the HERE solution is trying to support?
Yeah, absolutely. The further apart two pieces of information, the harder it is on our human brains, the more tired we get doing our jobs. There's been numerous studies to that effect, and the more that we can provide an integrated experience, the easier it is, the sharper and smarter we can be when we're performing our tasks. And that's true in the contact center or elsewhere across banks. I think just driving what's underpinning some of these challenges, from our perspective, we talk a lot about toggle chaos, those disparate, fragmented applications that agents need to use, and how they break that flow. And again, that cognitive load gets worse. Rekeying of information that wastes time, and generally just the overload and increased mental discomfort and stress the individuals face. Stephen, you've talked to me before about the knowledge base graveyard. How is it that agents are struggling with the information toolkits they have?
So this is one of the, because the information's in so many different places, it's nearly impossible for the administrators to be able to keep it aligned. So you're getting different answers in different places. And for the customers, this is even more magnified, as they will see one answer on the website, maybe hear something else from the contact center, and get something else when they go into the branch. And a lot of that is because old and outdated information is bleeding its way in. And now with AI, we're talking every day with companies who, I put a Copilot or an AI solution on top of my SharePoint or my repository, and it's giving bad information much more quickly. just because it's accessing information that's outdated. And one other point that's on here is this single pane of glass lie. We iframe into leading solutions. You pick your favorite CRM, telephony, et cetera, and we work with them out of the box. But at the same time, that's only part of the story, especially in a banking environment. I remember in Wells Fargo, you had the tab for online bill pay and for transfers and online banking, and it just endlessly tabbing. So just putting tools inside of one isn't enough.
Fully agree on that in terms of how the experience is, but also the other things you need to be productive, right? Because it's ultimately about frontline productivity. And I can have tools side by side, but I really need those tools to be integrated to be able to talk to each other effectively, so that I, as a user, don't need to rekey or constantly toggle, copy and paste across that suite of applications. Stephen, looking at what we're doing together and to provide a little bit more light on it, our focus and in our partnership for retail banking as well as for the other areas of financial services and beyond is helping customers with the trusted AI-ready knowledge that's delivered seamlessly in the agent workflow. You already mentioned a single pane of glass. That's something we deliver visually, but ultimately it's about that unified, intelligent workspace experience that agents benefit from, how we can actually change how people work so that they can be more productive, and enabling successful Gen AI delivery. We're really focused on the productivity point of view. We haven't talked much about security. I don't think we will on this webinar. But security is also the core of what we do. It has to be as a solution and what we're doing together, especially with AI being rolled out. But working with the largest financial services companies, providing a toolkit that protects against web threats, that provides app isolation, and also user behaviors like DLP and shadow AI that we know is rampant across many industries.
So this is how eGain is helping to support that. And eGain's been around for 28 years. We're a public company. This is what knowledge is what we do. We don't do CRM, we don't do telephony, but I can fairly say that in the last 3 years, AI and generative AI specifically has fairly reinvented what we do. We're essentially finding the information where it exists today, bringing that into a knowledge hub that is then the single source of truth. It helps knowledge authors better create content using generative capabilities, leveraging templates and style guides that already exist. It helps the knowledge managers be able to proactively know where there are overlaps, disconnects, expired links, you name it, in the content that exists, and then be able to maintain that as that single source of truth that is then published wherever it needs to be. It can support external facing tools as well as can be used by contact centers, and in the branches, whether it's a banker or an MSR, can support there as well. All of this with a feedback loop that allows to workflows that are AI optimized to be able to keep that up to date.
And Stephen, you've mentioned a lot of your customers are in financial services. What about the compliance element?
Compliance loves when they're able to know that they can see exactly what was in place at what time, be able to maintain version control, and know that the right information is flowing to the right banker in the flow of their work.
Critical with all the customers that we have to have that client compliance and operational risk managed. Like I mentioned, here is part of the AI Knowledge Suite. It's additional add-on offering that will help to wrap together eGain with your other applications. And what we deliver for clients is productivity enabled by an intelligent workspace. We refer to ourselves as a browser, but we're much more than that. We're really a secure AI-enabled platform, a platform that our clients control. So it's their environment to put their own content in, to enable their users, and really drive that productivity whilst also maintaining security, so isolating their content from the rest of the public internet. What clients can do with here is build super tabs where they can put eGain and any other adjacent application. It could be internally built, it could be vendor provided, CRM, CCaaS. It can also be native applications and legacy tools. They could build layouts, put those side by side. They also can enable their own AI tool inside our AI center. So supporting all of the major models like Anthropic, Gemini, and many others, and also some of the UI tools like Copilot. And then, like I was saying before, our unique technology enables applications to securely communicate or talk with each other, to pass context like a client name or product ID across applications to remove that rekeying and copy and paste that so many agents suffer from. And we round out the product with some other tools that help agents to use their technology more easily, like our search, where you can search the data inside eGain or your CRM or any of your other tools from the URL bar, and also notifications. So an easy way to launch the right super tab for the task based on the IVR data that comes through.
So one place to go with interoperability between them.
Exactly. And you could think about it like a wrapper. So taking the existing suite of content that you have today, so eGain, which is unifying all the knowledge you have as an organization, that single source of truth that Stephen talked about, as well as combining all the other systems you have, CRM, CCaaS, internally built, vendor provided, any written in any language, legacy web, and others, and really solve for that fragmentation, the fragmentation of apps plus the fragmentation of knowledge. And it's providing that customization. And Stephen, your team have had some familiarity with this, right? Because you've integrated eGain into the Here browser.
Yeah, and we'll show an example of what that looks like in just a moment. So here's the example that we're going to show. And this is really helping to embody this idea that information should flow to the person that needs it in the flow of their work. So it's just available. The way I start to think about this is, instead of helping agents or even bankers find the answers, we're helping answers find them.
It's been really great working with the eGain team from a technology point of view. We're firms who've known each other and had conversations over the last 2 or 3 years as our trajectories have come together. And then over the last couple of months, we've put together this really exciting integration, adding to how eGain is delivered today. So either that iframe embedding that Stephen was talking about inside of CRM and CCaaS solutions, or some customers who are accessing eGain in their default browser. This is a third way of accessing the eGain product, hopefully, as Stephen's going to show in a couple of minutes, in a way that is really deeply integrated and taking advantage of some of that feature set, so that the agent is more productive than they would be otherwise.
So here we show a chat coming in through Genesis to a banker. In this case, we see that there are in the center, we've got Salesforce. We can see there have been some previous issues where they reported that they lost their wallet. Now the participant is saying that they're trying to purchase tickets, but it's been declined. We're able to then interpret what that means and detect the intent. Notice here that the agent's not having to type at all. Now that it's referenced the previous issue that they had with lost their wallet, it's now guiding them into an authentication. And in this case, it's recognizing that this is a contact center agent, so it's going into out-of-wallet questions that you might be familiar with. Had it been a branch banker, it could direct the banker that they need to take a copy of the driver's license, etc. So it's walking us through out-of-wallet. Because it's also got integration to back-end core data, we can verify that these out-of-wallet questions are correct, go through and help them be able to authenticate the customer. And then once that's create and we confirm, that then talks back to the core, unblocks the card, and makes it all happen. And you notice the agent here never had to touch the keyboard. So the idea here is that we're showing it again in the flow of work in a way that's proactively helping to guide the interaction and reducing. We talked earlier about the cognitive load that's involved here. So we're able to reduce that significantly by being able to do this as they're doing their work.
Yeah, Stephen, that was really interesting to see. And you explained some of the things that are going on under the hood, like the back-end connections you have in your AI agent. But just to give a little bit of context too, so you're taking advantage of our totally flexible super tabs where you had Salesforce, AI agent, and the chat side by side, the chat from Genesis. Those super tabs are fully flexible. They can be rearranged, set up for different tasks. And then the reason why the agent doesn't have to type is because you've hooked into our local secure interrupt bus, which is passing data across those 3 applications without there needing to be a custom build of an integration with eGain and Salesforce, or with Genesis and Salesforce, or with eGain and Salesforce. It's all being provided, sorry, eGain and Genesis, it's all being provided within the Here browser, and again, done securely.
So here's an example of where knowledge can really make a big difference. And for those of you who may have joined last week, got to hear some of this from Amy herself. But when Rogue came to us, they were in the situation that they knew that they had a problem being able to find information when they needed it. What they were originally looking for is, could I find some sort of a search capability that could sit on top of my existing Confluence and other sources to surface information more quickly for agents and for MSRs in the branch? Well, what they found, though, is that just doing that was not going to take care of their challenges, in that they would still have to maintain the content where it lived with its own workflows. What they saw is that by migrating that content into the eGain Knowledge Hub and being able to leverage it with the AI workflows that support it, not only cared for the creation and curation of that content, but it also then allowed a 360-degree visibility into it with the analytics and everything that supported it. They saw, as we see with even major banks, a significant reduction in AHT. So you have 13%. So for what would have previously been a 5-minute call, it's just a little bit over 4 minutes. That impact is cascaded then across average time to answer, and overall making it easier for the agent to, we keep talking about cognitive load, by helping their agents be able to focus less on where do I find the answer, and with the information coming to them, they're able to then focus more on the interaction and supporting their member. They are also seeing now that, and that's evidenced through the agent satisfaction, but then the AI agent that's supporting them is 77% of the time coming to them with exactly what they needed at the right time, as you saw an example from that from the video. We'll also give the example of a major Fortune 100 financial company. They have 28,000 contact center agents as part of their 50,000 employees. Their challenge when they came to us was this idea of asynchronous learning, which is, I could talk for a whole half an hour on this idea alone. You think about the initial training that agents go through and learning the tools, learning how to work everything. And these training periods could be from 4 to 8 or even 12 weeks. Unfortunately, as soon as they get out on the floor, a great deal of that is lost. What this is looking to do is, by delivering information in the flow of work at the time they're needed and personalized for their role, they're able to get that. It essentially becomes just-in-time training that allows them to do their job and learn how to do it as they're doing their work. Finally, I'll mention here that they did a survey across really all 50,000 employees, since its back office workers are able to access this too. And they asked, what's the tool, of all the tools you have, which tools help you do your job the most? And especially the contact center agents came back with a resounding #1 for eGain.
Invaluable, Stephen, that kind of rating. Congratulations on both those use cases. They're both also really big banks. If I'm, say, at a smaller organization, maybe a regional player, and I'm feeling like I'm falling behind in the AI race, what do you think the quick win is? What do you think is something that could be done today to make a difference?
Yeah, we're hearing that every day. Being able to establish the one source of truth, even if it's not supporting agents directly, if you already have an AI tool or some sort of an agent assist, making sure that's sourced from one single source of truth is the biggest potential win. And then you start to see being able to bring this in more proactively then drives the gains we've seen. It all comes back though to trust. You've got to be able to trust the content that you're seeing. You need trust to get adoption, and you need adoption to get these kinds of results.
Yeah, that makes a huge amount of sense. And returning the favor of giving a couple examples of customers and the improvements they've seen. So the first we have is from a global tier 1 bank. And as an organization, we'll go on site with customers, we'll sit alongside their agents, we'll do time and motion studies to look at what's happening. I don't know how you find things, Stephen, but we have a lot of customers who know they have a productivity challenge, but haven't measured it, don't quite know where to get started in terms of identifying what's causing the challenge. And what we discovered in this client engagement, that within commercial banking and their call center, the average call was taking 42 minutes. They were using over 30 applications. That includes websites they were visiting for interest rates and other information. But they didn't have any integrations across those workflows, very few indeed. And as a result of using so many apps, they were also having PC performance issues. The person was getting worn down. The client was also getting worn down being on the call for 42 minutes, and their machine was also giving up. As you might imagine, that had a huge negative impact across a lot of the metrics they tracked, like AHT, like their durations, also that dead time that they were having on calls, which could have, in some instances, was 1 minute of every 2 as downtime. So no one's speaking, neither the agent or the customer. The opposite type scores that you just mentioned in terms of satisfaction for customers. And when they implemented here, they leveraged our tooling like what you had in the video, super tabs, using interoperability with signals, as we call them, and strong use of search as well. And they really reworked how their agents worked. And that was a 45% reduction in call times, from reducing the rekeying of information, lookup of data, finding the right trusted source across all those 30 apps. They saw a 20% improvement in their customer and employee survey ratings. And they were actually able to generate a $6 million cost save, as well as a $15 million legacy technology save. Huge improvements across the board, changing workflows to enable agent productivity. Looking at a slightly different use case as well. So the second one here on the next slide along is a European tier 1 bank. And they were under pressure from the regulators. I don't think this comes as a lot of surprise in our highly regulated industry. But they were struggling with onboarding and QA because of that data fragmentation, that same problem that you're talking about, across their national, regional, and global databases. They saw very often high error rates of miskeying critical information across the different tools that an agent needed to re-enter the same piece of information over and over again. And again, another scenario with limited integration of workflows. They had been fined by the regulator. They had supervision orders that they were strictly under. And that was having an impact on reputation from those regulatory sanctions. And they were starting to see that impact as well, their client list. So with implementing here, they reduced the backlog on cases that they had. They transformed their performance so they were regularly hitting KPIs from the regulators. And one of the reasons that happened, and again, we talked about that underlying issue, that toggle, they were able to reduce the number of clicks inside a common task journey by 85%. So if they had to click, I think in this case, they were clicking over 50 times, and were able to reduce that to fewer than 10 to complete a task. And overall, that led to a 40% increase in their frontline efficiency.
You know, Vicki, one of the things that stood out to me on the previous slide was the dead time, which I think studies have shown has a much more deleterious impact on customer experience, even more than hold time. And the problem isn't the technology, it's the agents having to click to so many different places, and in this use case, 50 different clicks just to get to the information that's needed, that's really causing that. Has that been some of the biggest impact that you've seen, especially as you're looking at impacts to customer experience?
Yeah, and you're absolutely spot on in terms of that dead time and the impact it has on the customer impression. The brand value as well in certain surveys goes down considerably when dead time is high. You know what we've observed in person is it is the toggling, it's finding the right app, right? So if you imagine having 30 apps open, which one do I need to go to next, and actually navigating Control Tab or using your mouse to find the right one. But then there's logins. So if you weren't already logged into, and this links back to the performance issue, if you weren't already logged into the app that you need next, that can take a couple minutes, especially with multi-factor authentication. And that also is a big drag. So having a secure environment, having some tooling that can allow for refreshing of login rates based on user behavior and activity is also a big save in reducing that downtime, that dead time.
Great. So this is the nice thing is bringing these together. I think this is really an opportunity where 1 + 1 = 3. So bringing together the combinability and the back end talking that happens with here to allow everything to come into one pane of glass, along with knowledge in the flow of work. You think about just the everyday kind of questions that can be sped up, but then imagine the impact for an agent or an MSR or a branch banker when they have something that doesn't happen often, but you need to get the question right the first time. Think like escapement or survivorship. Bringing those together in the flow of their work, the combined impact here is significant. And Vicki, what else do you think about this as you're thinking about the two working together?
Yeah, absolutely. Strengthening up that compliance and security, I think, is critical. The other piece of the pie, and when we look at this from a return on investment point of view, is the effort required to get this up and running is minimal, right? You've done the work to integrate into some of the cool functionality we have within here browser. And that's available today. People can start testing it with their existing instance of eGain or trying out eGain for the first time in a really flexible platform. So a lot of systems do require a huge amount of work, in some cases 2-year transition times to update, and we're just not dealing with that here. It's simple, it's easy to use.
Yeah, I'll echo that. And again, that's another benefit of what we've seen from generative AI. In the olden days, 3 years ago, we would have to create a taxonomy of knowledge and start to place information in it. Now we're able to incorporate knowledge in mass, fairly unstructured data, to be able to create the content, organize it, and homogenize, make it consistent all at the same time.
Yeah, that's really interesting. We've talked a few times so far about how AI is changing things. It's creating urgency. It's causing a reason to invest in the right technology to solve the contact center dilemma, but it's also making it easier to make that transition.
Agreed. So some of you might be wondering how you might be able to rationalize this for a business case. And if your use case is primarily contact center, we have on our website, and we'll have a QR code here in a moment that you can use. An easy way, just based on what you pay your agents today, your current first contact resolution and handle time, and just being able to leverage what we've seen from other clients to see what could this mean for your organization. If you want to also include the back end, the knowledge creation, enterprise users, and MSRs or branch bankers, we also have a more full model that you could talk to us and we can show what that looks like for you. So that's one thing we want to make sure to tell you about. Here again is that QR code that we talked about that helps you calculate your ROI. And we've seen such demand at eGain specifically for the different knowledge solutions that are both customer facing, internal facing, everything from processes and procedures to service to sales to financial wellness. We've now packaged that in our banking suite. Then here is the QR code and the link for that. And you're welcome to reach out to sales at eGain, sales at here, or either of us directly.
All right. Thanks so much, Vicki and Stephen. Okay, let's open it up for questions. If you have anything for Vicki or Stephen, now's the time to pop those into the questions pane. And while we wait for any more to come in, just a reminder, there's one more webinar in the series. The final session is Wednesday, April 23rd, 12 Eastern, 9 Pacific. And we'll be joined by our partners at Ascent AI to talk about regulatory compliance and how AI knowledge helps teams stay current and consistent. Okay, let's get to the questions. So first question, actually some questions here for Vicky. At a high level, can you walk us through what this integration process looks like when connecting apps to here?
Absolutely. Like I said, it's very simple and straightforward. So every client gets their own here instance that can be branded and themed, and it's yours to control. And to add content, say if it's a web application like eGain, it's as simple as copying and pasting a URL. And then that content ties into our super tabs. It can be connected to search, it can be connected to signals and interoperability. We always help clients in that initial process, but it's as straightforward as copying and pasting a URL.
Easier than copying. It doesn't get much easier than copying and pasting, Vicky. I guess the next related question is, it sounds like there are a lot of apps that can be integrated or surfaced through here. Where do customers typically start and why? And related is, what order do they bring things in?
Yeah, those are two excellent questions. So first of all, in terms of types of apps that work inside here today, we have pre-built connectors, so easy ways of integrating apps now with eGain, as well as with Salesforce, Genesis, with Dynamics, with the whole MS365 suite, Google. We also have developer tools like Atlassian's full suite, and AI that I mentioned before, all the major models, as well as Copilot. In addition to that, clients can bring in their own internal apps. So what we very often see in a POC to test out those concepts is taking a couple of those main vendor solutions, let's say Salesforce and eGain together, and then adding in a couple of homegrown applications. We can help customers if they are struggling to get a sense of where the improvement could come from. And we do on-site and virtual experience sessions led by our Chief Experience Officer and his team, really to do a catalog of all the apps you use today, observe some of those agent journeys, and then come back with specific recommendations about what we would do in implementing here to help make improvements to frontline productivity.
Question, I think this is for both Stephen, you and Vicky, which is, how did the customers in your case studies build their business case or ROI before they got approval to move forward?
Well, I'll take that first. So what we normally see is leveraging tools like the one that we shared, where we can leverage past results from 28 years of doing this and recent results from clients who are taking advantage of the new generative capabilities. We normally start in the contact center just because everything is measured there. We know down to the second, handle time and first contact resolution, and et cetera. And so by moving those levers, it's very easy to then be able to project that. And then doing that early on, normally, here's the spoiler alert, we normally see something like a 4 to 8x ROI in most cases for when we're specking out what this looks like. And then that's magnified even more with what Vicky's been talking about with here. Vicky, how similar do you see for you?
Yeah, very similar. We can rely on past experience. There's some very common threads and behavior patterns across the industry, as you might imagine. We can do an hour phone call with a virtual screen share and come back with some real case-specific areas for improvement. The other thing we see is we're very often looped into a bigger digitalization or modernization program where the goals might be to roll out AI, and that's already being stalled. So we can achieve strategic objectives that already exist as part of larger programs and be an accelerator. And then the business case is a little bit different to that pure ROI logic.
And then the last thing I'll say on this is bringing together both what we've talked about. So we don't have to look at just cost reduction. There's also the risk reduction to have compliant information at your fingertips, But more and more, we're seeing banks and credit unions look at this as an opportunity to build top line. How can I do a better job of needs assessment and service to sales within the context of what we're already doing, helping members or customers? So we're actually seeing business cases that are supporting not only cost reduction, but then business growth as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
What else do you have, Miguel? Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we've seen exactly the same thing, the opportunity to introduce upsells, why the Knowledge Center is so important to be part of the workflow, and be able to help the agent with upsell opportunities, identifying those, and then having the right information at hand, whether that's giving a discount or providing information about an adjacent product. There's a lot of ways that with making your agents and your frontline teams smarter and better enabled with AI and the right information, that you can get gains.
Awesome, thank you both. And I think that's all the time we have for questions today. So just wanted to thank everyone again for joining, and a big thank you to Vicki and Stephen for an awesome session.